Salutations, respective viewers. This is George from Ireland. Well, this video is assessing the current state of play in British politics. Theresa May is under pressure on all fronts. Some people in the European Union are being obdurate about the Brexit negotiations. There's some truculent ultra-leavers in her own party, and indeed some of the ultra-remainers are giving her a hard time. She's a Remainer who is implementing Leave because that's what the people voted for. So she's fairly reasonable on that. And of course there are reasonable Leavers. I would like to count myself as one of those. So we all know that Boris Johnson resigned as Foreign and Commonwealth Secretary last week. Was it anything to create a splash? He's very egotistical, and behind this buffoonish demeanour there lurks a coldly calculating mind. He's one of the most fun people in British politics. You get great belly laughs out of him, and that was always his great advantage because he appeals to people who are not traditional Tory voters. He's the only British politician who's known mononymically. He's got that name recognition, and that's why he's twice Mayor of London. But he's got his eye on the top job. Presumably he will resign principally because he thinks this gives him the best shot at being Prime Minister, though I think he's wrong. I think he had one go at it, and that was 2 years ago. He didn't get it. I don't think it's going to happen. But perhaps this gives him more of a chance than if he'd stayed on as Foreign and Commonwealth Secretary. There's a faction that he can appeal to. But the Tory party's fallen out of love with him. He published a self-serving article in the Torygraph the other day justifying his decision to resign from the cabinet. And now, of course, it would be people that only justify themselves, they condemn themselves in such articles. And the Telegraph is the newspaper in which he cut his teeth way back in the 90s as a Brussels correspondent. One of his colleagues at the time said that he would savage the European Union in his column in the Telegraph, but behind the scenes would be sympathetic and say, yes, of course, it's sensible, and any wise person would be a Europhile. Anyway, I wouldn't trust Boris so far as I could throw him, and he's about 15 stone. So Theresa May, she in 2017, after she scraped home in that election, she suggested she would serve as Prime Minister until Brexit was completed, due to be March 2019. Then on a visit to Japan, she suggested she'd serve a full Parliament as up to 2022. Well, when will Brexit be completed? We know that the United Kingdom is exiting the EU in March next year. However, this whole new situation will be phased in, leaving the single market, and then only if all 27 member states agree. So it's very unclear when she sees herself standing down, but I think she's a lame duck already. Her days are numbered. People are openly talking about a leadership challenge. I don't think this will lead to her ouster. Who would be the obvious one to replace her? I suppose Boris Johnson and indeed David Davis. I don't think anyone from the cabinet would go against her. Michael Gove, he's a filthy tove and just comes across as oily to most people, has no popular backing. So those two big beasts would go for it. Davis is probably too old now that he's 70. Bojo, this would be his last hurrah, but I don't think he's going to go his way. He's less popular than he was. He seemed to be self-indulgent, what he did resigning from the cabinet in that way. Anyway, so Brexit is the thing which is dominating everything. Parliament seems to talk of little else, and even someone who's a political obsessive, such as myself, gets sick of it. The technical details are a bit too tedious. Remainers say they want a meaningful vote on the final Brexit agreement. What's a meaningful vote, as opposed to a vote? Which votes in Parliament are unmeaningful? So Parliament voted for the Referendum Act, voted for the EU Notice of Withdrawal Act, voted for the EU Withdrawal Act. How many more votes do they need? So I get it. If they lose, these ultra-Remainers will say it's not meaningful. If they win, it is meaningful. So that's the definition of this operative word for them. So it's preposterous. I don't recall them demanding this and all these other agreements. I mean, will it be an international treaty? If so, I suppose ratified. Anyway, it's a bit like the referendum in Denmark in, I think, 93, the Treaty of Maastricht, when the Danes voted against it first time round, and the EU had them vote again, with the Danish political elite being overwhelmingly Europhile. Second time round, Denmark voted for the Treaty of Maastricht. The Republic of Ireland, where I hail from, voting against the Treaty of Nice the first time. A year later, the powers that be had us vote again. Of course, we were flooded with scaremongering and funds from the EU, propaganda messages from our own governments. And second time, people voted for it. Oh, the first one didn't count. It was a protest vote. And the second one was a not protest vote, supporting the government vote. So that's okay. But it's the one-way ratchet. It can be revisited if the Euro fanatics win, but never if they lose. Sorry, if they lose, it can be redone. But if they win, it can never be re-examined. Likewise, Treaty of Lisbon, same story, made to vote a second time, the Irish Republic. So Remainers, for the most part, wanted no referendum. Be fair to them. The Liberal Democrats did demand a referendum about 10 years ago on EU membership. Only they and UKIP wanted it at that stage. But now that they've lost, they wanted another one. Most Remainers were against this. Labour was against it, and most of the Conservative Remainers were against it. Cameron thought he would shoot UKIP's fox, it would enhance his authority, he would be the hero of Brussels and Strasbourg, toasted by Remainers in his own party. But it boomeranged on him spectacularly. It ended Cameron and not UKIP. Although admittedly, UKIP's probably going to dissolve after March because there'll be no European Union to oppose. No British membership thereof, I mean. So Justine Greening, a former Tory cabinet minister, said that she wants a second referendum. You should have seen William Hague's article in the Telegraph where Lord Hague skewers that argument. But I shan't be sidetracked in that one. It's extraordinary to see political cross-dressing. Lord Mandelson is perhaps the quintessence of a conceited Euro fanatic who denounces anyone as a vicious bigot who is not completely on board with the European project. Notably, in 1983, he savaged the European Economic Community, as it then was, which was the tadpole of the frog, which is now the European Union. And so it was much less integrated, and he wanted to withdraw. How he's changed his tune. Well, there's much joy in heaven over every sinner who repenteth. But he says a hard Brexit would be better than the Chequers deal that Theresa May is propounding. So it's extraordinary. He's going to argue his opponent's case for him. And Farage has also swapped sides. Nigel Farage, former leader of UKIP, says that the United Kingdom would be better staying in the European Union than leaving on the terms that Theresa May has suggested. Well, this is ludicrous. Does it show that these people are completely illogical, inconsistent, and just prone to hyperbole? It seems daft. Now, her Chequers deal, to me, is not enough of a Brexit. It's giving too much control to the EU after the United Kingdom leaves. However, it is still some kind of a Brexit. It's still some kind of an advance. Less regulation, less immigration, and, let's say, less money to the EU. It would be better than staying in the European Union. As I've often said, I prefer to avoid leaving without an agreement, but at the moment it's seeming difficult to avoid. So the UKIP have gone up in the polls a bit because these hardline Brexiteers in the Conservative Party are saying that Theresa May has sold the pass. However, I think this is really their last good showing. Remember, March next year, they'll lose all their MEPs, and therefore a lot of their funding, their media publicity. They've lost almost all their local councillors. They've got nobody in the House of Commons, very few in the House of Lords. They'll lose their people in the Welsh Assembly, the next Welsh Assembly election, and that will be that. It will be an extinct party, well, in parliamentary terms. Anyway, about Northern Ireland remaining in the single market, I've adumbrated in a previous video why I think this is acceptable. Notably, the UK, since it was founded in 1707, did have different laws for different parts of the United Kingdom. England didn't have to copy Scotland and vice versa. Ireland, when the whole of us were in it, we didn't have exactly the same laws as Great Britain, or Wales didn't have to have the same laws as England, Scotland, Ireland. So it would be precedented for Northern Ireland to do something significantly different from the rest of the country, because all regions of the UK are a little different. We should go with the logic of that. The DUP want devolution. I mean, I know this will be controlled by London. If the Northern Ireland Assembly voted in it, I think, well, almost certain they would vote to remain within the single market. Anyway, so Labour is being very opportunistic, seeking to discomfort the Tories over Brexit. So there's Labour voting with these hardcore Brexiteers, despite Labour being a rather Remain party. just like over Maastricht. They would say it's playing politics with the nation's future. They would do anything to wrongfoot the Conservatives, to embarrass them. And so Theresa May only avoided the ignominy of a House of Commons defeat by four votes. And that's because a few Labour rebels defied their whip and voted with the government. So it's nauseatingly opportunistic. So Labour's ahead in the polls. Would they like to force a vote of confidence? They would narrowly lose it if they did. Labour might think there's everything to play for next time. The Liberal Democrats, bizarrely, seem to be almost silent. Remember, they were the most Europhile party. They were Europhile before it was fashionable, way back in the 1950s. They all said they're not left or right of the other parties, they're ahead of the other parties, into ideas that other parties catch up with later, like the gay rights agenda. So it's proof yet again that being extremist Remainers does not help. They're actually not, in principle, against leaving the EU, but often they say they want a second referendum. Lord Reynard, lucky chap, this peer of the realm bumped into me about a month ago, and he said that the Liberal Democrats, well, there should be a thing on a referendum on the Brexit deal, and then no more referendums ever. Why were they used to be in love with referenda? I suppose because they perform so atrociously elections. Well, there's so many other issues to look at. The NHS is in difficult straits, I shan't say dire. Immigration has dropped significantly, but nowhere near May's target. The school funding has been cut, although if it's cut in bureaucracy, that's to be welcomed. And there's a recruitment crisis for teachers. So there are many other issues for the government to grapple with. But almost all their time and rhetoric is devoted to this one issue. I so look forward to this divisive issue being put to bed. It divides all parties, if we're frank, and that's that. We must go full steam ahead and implement the will of the people.